Hello everyone, welcome back to the True North Report, news everyone needs to know. So I'm just here to give some updates on the situation in Iran right now. I don't really have a proper formula set up, not exactly a list of what I'm going down, but we're going to look through. Now, if you want to know about updates as they're coming through, you can check out the TrueNorthReport.org. I have spent the last 24 hours or so updating it quite regularly. As you can see here, it all falls underneath the breaking news. And right now, it's taking about half of the front page. These are all updates of what's happening with Iran and the situation there. There's some updates with what Washington is doing, what Tehran is doing. So you can go check it out there, and there's a lot there. But we're going to be looking through a lot of it here now. And what is going on? Now, the main thing that we're going to start off with has to do with the narrative that is surrounding what is going on. The narrative that is coming out has to do with the fact that the man who ended up getting killed, the general in the Iranian army, Qasem Soleimani, the narrative that was coming out as to why this ended up happening had to do with the fact that Soleimani was it was supposed to be a response. This is kind of the way it was presented off first to what ended up happening at the Baghdad embassy. And that Soleimani was planning an attack against that would have resulted in the deaths of many more American servicemen and workers in the area. This is what we was presenting it as, but then this was rapidly changing. And it was rapidly changing by some of the things that was being put out, some of the things that people who worked for the Trump administration, people in politics, and those who even previously worked for him, what they were saying about the matter. So, for instance, we have here a tweet by John Bolton that was put out on January 3rd, 2020. And it says, "Congratulations to all those involved in the elimination of Qasem Soleimani. Long in the making, this was a decisive blow against Iran's malign Quds Force activities worldwide. Hope this is the first step to regime change in Tehran." So first of all, the first thing here is that John Bolton says this is long in the making. This was being presented as some sort of response, as if this was to an imminent threat that needed to be stopped before it resulted in the death of American soldiers and American workers, because there's a lot of oil workers over in Iran right now that are actually being told to evacuate, along with the Canadian government actually issued a warning to Canadians in the area in Iraq that they should probably leave. So this is long in the making, which proves, it's proving that, in fact, the attack that took place, that took out Soleimani, was not actually a response to anything. It was not an imminent threat that had to be eliminated, but it was in fact actually pre-planned and orchestrated by the Trump regime. Now, the thing is Soleimani, they're trying to pretend as if he was in there for devious means, that's why he was in Iraq that day when he ended up getting shot and killed. But that doesn't seem to be the case, because he was invited there by Iraqi diplomats. He was being escorted by Iraqi police and other Iraqi diplomats, and they were actually in the area and ended up getting killed when all of this ended up taking place. Because that was the thing that I didn't realize at the time when I was reporting on this yesterday, but then came to my attention later, was the fact that about 9 people were involved with the Iranian government that were there. There was another 20 or so, or around that number, that ended up getting killed that were Iraqi civilians and members of the Iraqi police. So there were a lot of collateral damage that was done by this attack. Then we also have this by Lindsey Graham. Again, January 3rd, 2020. "We killed the most powerful man in Tehran short of the Ayatollah. This was not an act of revenge for what he had done in the past. This was a preemptive defensive strike plan to take out the organizer of attacks yet to come." So once again, a preemptive defensive strike for attacks yet to come. But these attacks, apparently, they only knew about just coming up. Again, they were saying imminent danger. But that doesn't seem to be the case. And actually, Lindsey Graham ends up proving that this was not the case, because right now, one of the problems that Democrats have is the fact that Trump ended up ordering this strike without consulting Congress. And this is something that a lot of Democrats are criticizing Trump for. And in defense of Trump, Lindsey Graham ended up coming and speaking up and said, oh, well, Trump and I actually spoke about this. We spoke about it on Monday when we were golfing in Florida. That Trump said he had plans to take out Soleimani. So once again, not an imminent threat, but a pre-planned, and they say it's a defensive strike. This was an offensive strike. This was not a defensive strike whatsoever right now. So the narrative that they're trying to present is already starting to fall apart. But even there's some information that is starting to come out that they don't want. They do not want this release. Probably one of the biggest things is this picture here. This is a picture of Soleimani in Tikrit, Iraq in 2015. He was there with American soldiers. They were doing a joint operation against ISIS, because the thing is Soleimani was actually instrumental when it came to destroying ISIS. This guy, if you hate ISIS, this guy did a lot of work. Now, Trump has been in there and has taken the credit, and he has done his part, I suppose, if we're believing the narrative. But it was Soleimani that was really the man responsible for making sure that keeping ISIS in check the best he could, and eventually to the destruction of ISIS. They're still around for sure. And one of the reasons I don't believe that Trump was as hard-ass on ISIS as he likes to claim, despite the fact right now he's going on about the fact that they killed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, is the fact that ISIS once again was a U.S. asset. These were the moderate rebels that they were supporting in Iraq and Syria, and then turned out to be a crazy freaking regime. This is the people they were giving supplies and weapons to, was ISIS. As I stated yesterday, it was a CIA Mossad creation. Sort of like Al-Qaeda was back inside the 80s, and we ended up seeing what ended up taking place with that. So Iran actually had more of a reason than America did to take out ISIS. And I kind of went into details yesterday about what the reason for ISIS was. That it all had to do with helping create the Greater Israel Project, having it come to fruition. So this is one thing that they do not want people to be aware of, is the fact that they were actually in league with Soleimani at one point. Now, a lot of what they're talking about right now is, and I'm going a little bit on speculation and what I heard, but what I do know for a fact is that right now, the U.S. is talking about many soldiers as well, that Soleimani was responsible for the death of at least 600 American soldiers. That's a nice round number, isn't it? And it was actually it came from the U.S. Department of State in a briefing they did on April 2nd, 2019, and this is where, before they had said that Soleimani and the Iranians were responsible for 500 deaths. This is what they said in the past, and in this briefing, they ended up saying that he was actually responsible for closer to 600 deaths, if not more. And Soleimani was a name of soldiers in the area knew about, and they blamed him for the death. Now, the main thing that they're blaming him for is the fact that they're claiming that a bunch of IEDs were used, that were supplied by the Iranian government that, at the word of Soleimani, were supplies, and this was responsible for the death of upwards of 600 American soldiers. And this is from the Washington Examiner. Qasem Soleimani was responsible for the death of hundreds of American soldiers, January 2nd, 2020. We're just reading this part here. Last year, the State Department revealed that Iran is responsible for the death of more than 600 American service members during the war in Iraq, higher than the previous estimates of 500. Commander Sean Robertson, a spokesman for the Defense Department, told the Washington Examiner that the exact figure is at least 603. Robertson said that the casualties were the result of explosive form penetrators, other improvised explosive devices, improvised rocket-assisted munitions, rockets, mortars, rocket-propelled grenades, small arms, snipers, and other attacks in Iraq. Now, this is where a lot of the people that are cheering on the death of Soleimani, the assassination of Soleimani, this is one of the things that they're pointing to, is how many soldiers are responsible for the death. But it is important to note that these are not soldiers, Americans that were killed on American soil. These were soldiers that had traveled half the world away in order to fight in a war right in Iran's backyard. They would have a reason to maybe want to do their jobs. The U.S. has a policy in place. I can't remember the name of the policy right now, but if any enemy army so much is landed on this side of the world, South America or anywhere in North America, they will combat that army. And the reason is for means of national defense. The fact that having an enemy army on this side of the world is considered a threat to them, a threat to their security, because it can be used as a jumping off point in order for them to attack America. Well, Iran, I'm not so sure if they have a policy in place that's similar to this, but we do know for a fact that Iran would probably have quite similar concerns right now, considering the inflammatory words that are being used by Trump at the moment, not just at the moment, but since he became president of the United States concerning Iran, and some of the stuff that he has done. You could see why maybe they might be financing the other side. It's no different than America would do itself. And in fact, this is something that America does do. Just because they do not have boots on the ground in a certain country doesn't mean they're not financing part of the war. This is exactly the same sort of thing that was happening between Russia and America back in the 80s in Afghanistan. These proxy wars that were being fought during the Cold War was each side financing, arming, and backing one side of a sectarian violence that was going on in Afghanistan. And it was all for the means of national interest. So I find it a little more difficult to try and make this argument. Of course, I stand with my American brothers, but war is war. You can't really be making the same claim as if Iran had come halfway across the world and had begun bombing American citizens or bombing American soldiers on American soil. That would be a bit different. And when it comes to this talk about Soleimani being a terrorist, Soleimani was a military commander. The second highest, one of the highest people in all of Iran. The second highest when it came to leadership in Iran. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to do, just like an American general, an American 2 or 3 star general would do exactly what they were supposed to do if the roles were reversed. So this is sort of the ridiculous part that I find in the whole thing, is the fact that this is no different. This is absolutely no different than what America would have done. But they're pretty much upset because they won't bend the knee. Now this is leading to a narrative right now about all over Twitter and Minds and different accounts, people who are cheering on the death of Soleimani are starting to post something. It might be the phrase itself, sometimes it'll be a picture accompanying the phrase, but they're posting the phrase that pay attention to those who are upset about a terrorist being killed. Pay close attention. So the point is that anybody who's upset with this strike that ended up taking place are upset because an Iranian terrorist ended up getting killed. Now, there's plenty of people in Iran who were upset by the death of Soleimani. Unlike what Mike Pompeo and many of the what Trump and many of the other members of the government right now in America are claiming, this was not a popular thing to do. You can just look at this right here. Is a video clip of people who took to the streets in order to for Soleimani's funeral. Doesn't look like the Iranian people are really turning on this, but they're trying to claim that anybody that does not beat the drums of war, anybody who has a problem with the situation, having a problem with the fact that America just made a strike that could lead to a war, it's because they're supporting an Iranian terrorist. But on the other side, if we look at this from not from the Iranians' perspective, but those who are upset about this, Most people are upset with this strike because it's going to lead to another never-ending war, just like Afghanistan, just like Iraq, just like all these areas where America doesn't come in and doesn't fight fight the fight that need to be had, and then leaves. This is them occupying the country and controlling the country. This is not like Japan in World War II, where America came in, they bombed the shit out of them after they were attacked, it's worth pointing out. Although there seems to be a lot of evidence supporting that America knew about the attack. But regardless, they were attacked. They weren't able to deter the attack. 2,000 American soldiers were killed on American soil. I'm pretty sure Hawaii was considered part of America at that point. But 2,000 soldiers were killed at Pearl Harbor, and they responded. It was a world war at that time. They came in, they bombed the shit out of Japan, and then they helped build Japan back up. This is not what's happening these days. Far gone are those days where they built up a nation they destroyed and then it became a strong ally to them. So many of these people who don't like what Trump ended up doing, they don't like it because it's leading to another never-ending war, and they just see it par for the course. That the military contractors, the ones who are really going to make money off this, and they are making money off there's Lockheed Martin's stocks, and there's Northrop Grumman's stocks, spiked after this attack and the nervousness that is coming. With a possible war with Iran. But then there's also the rest of us, who see this as being a war not for America, but a war for Israel. And that was the whole point behind it. So, for those who are saying that you're going to pay close attention to those who are upset by the death of an Iranian terrorist, while you're not wrong that there are people that are literally over on this side of the world mourning the death of Soleimani, they're now conflating this with anybody that did not toe the narrative, did not beat the drums of war, did not agree with Trump's strike against Soleimani. Which means that the rest of us will be paying very close attention as well. Those of us who are aware that this is a war for Israel will be paying attention to those who are advocating for a war for a foreign army. We'll be watching and taking notes just like you are. This is why I'm angry, because I see it as being part of the never-ending war. I see it as being a war for Israel. They will pull in, and if this war ends up happening, they will pull in America's allies too. And just because Canada has cucked Justin Trudeau in office, don't think that excludes Canada from joining that war. It most likely will mean that our soldiers will be getting put overseas to help fight Iran. So those who see it from this attention should pay attention for those who advocate for a war for the benefit of a foreign nation, and for those who are willing to send young men to die for Israel. Now, where is it? Where is it? There it is. So, I want to show you something now. I want to show you a clip from the news. I said yesterday, during my live stream when I was talking about this whole situation, that this was going to be, that Israel was going to achieve their goals by walking through a river of American blood. And they have more or less admitted this by now. This is up on my website right now. So 60 minutes.
So, Leslie, there has been a lot of speculation about whether Israel would go it alone, would attack Iran all on its own. What does Mayor Dagan say about that?
Well, he thinks it's a mistake generally to make it an Israeli-Iranian issue. It should be an international issue. Somehow the Saudis should be encouraged to speak up and pressure the United States. And what he really would like to happen is Israel sits back and the Americans do it for the Israelis. It would then be internationalized. He knows that Israel will be attacked, whoever does it, but they'll be attacked less. And what he's most worried about is the retaliation.
So right there, what I said yesterday is just proven out to be true. They want America to fight the war for them. Once again, achieve their goals by walking through a river of American blood. And not just American blood, but the blood of America's allies too. The blood of the British, the blood of the French, the blood of Canadians. This is who Israel wants to fight their war for. And that came from ex-Mossad chief Meir Dagan. He was the one who said that. Just proving that this is true. The Israelis are actually cowards. They think they're all high and mighty because they have gone up against unarmed civilians in Palestine. And the crap that they have pulled there. I mean, just the other day, there was Palestinians, and I believe it was the West Bank. May have been Gaza, but I'm pretty sure this was in the West Bank. They spent 2 years building their own homes. 2 years. And then they were told that their homes, their brand new homes, were going to be demolished. And they had a hearing at 10 a.m. in order to fight the Israeli government to not demolish their homes. At 8 a.m. that morning, the bulldozers showed up and destroyed their homes. Now, Trump has spoken. He gave a speech where he was talking about the situation that is being dealt with right now in Iran. Everything that they did, the attack on Soleimani, the assassination attempt on him. And this is what Trump ended up saying.
In recent weeks, American warriors executed a daring raid that killed the savage leader of ISIS, al-Baghdadi.
Or so is the claim. See, my other problem with this, what he brings about al-Baghdadi, is al-Baghdadi has been reported to be dead 4 years in a row. Al-Baghdadi's dead, al-Baghdadi's dead, al-Baghdadi's dead, al-Baghdadi's dead. And I'm supposed to believe it every single time that he is in fact dead. But then, once again, just like they did with Osama bin Laden, did they show you a body? No, they just came out and said he's dead. They threw his body into the ocean. That's what they did with al-Baghdadi. So all I have is Trump's word and the American intelligence agencies and military. That's all we have to go on.
He was a depraved butcher who will never again hurt another innocent person. Last night, at
Shit.
my direction, the United States military executed a flawless strike that terminated the terrorist ringleader responsible for gravely wounding and murdering thousands and thousands of people and hundreds at least of Americans. Qasem Soleimani has been killed, and his bloody rampage is now forever gone. He was plotting attacks against Americans, but now we've ensured that his atrocities have been stopped for good. They are stopped for good.
Now, if this is true, what attacks was he planning? Because this is something that came out very soon after the death of Soleimani. He was planning attacks on American soldiers in Iraq. But what were these plans? That's what I want to know. But if it's been stopped, then surely you can come out and give details as to what's the attack. But once again, leading back to the beginning, we have confirmation from John Bolton that the assassination of Soleimani was long time in the making. We have Lindsey Graham, who ended up admitting that Trump told them that they were going after Soleimani on Monday while they were golfing in Florida. So what are these attacks?
I don't know if you know what was happening, but he was planning a very major attack, and we got him. We are a peace-loving nation, and my administration remains firmly committed to establishing peace and harmony.
I love the doublespeak that is being used right now. America has been in a state of perpetual war for 50 years, going all across the globe. And Trump, he says that he's a peace-loving man. Trump criticized Obama for how many drone strikes, how many bombs were dropped during the Obama administration. Now, don't get me wrong, you won't find any love for Obama over here. But in Trump's first year, he dropped half of the amount of bombs that Obama did over 8 years. So it's kind of hard to claim that you're a peace-loving man and that you're against war when this is what you're going for, when this is what you're doing.
Among the nations in the world, we do not seek war, we do not seek nation building, we do not seek regime change.
John Bolton literally said that he hopes that there's a regime change in Iran after this situation, and they have constantly done regime changes. In fact, they did it in Iran in 1953. Nobody likes to talk about that, do they? And they've done it to countries all over the world whenever it fit their interest.
But as president, I will never hesitate to defend the safety of the American people. So let this be a warning to terrorists. If you value your own life, you will not threaten the lives of our citizens. Americans have many blessings, but perhaps the greatest among them is the blessing of being protected by the most exceptional and virtuous military on the face of God's earth.
Now, there are some terrorist groups out there that we can all admit are terrorists. These would be groups... Actually, ISIS is a perfect example, because these were people who terrorized their own people. These were people that terrorized the international community, that did atrocious acts. Atrocious acts. And then there are those who are terrorists in the eyes of the beholder. And what I mean by that is the fact that one nation's army is another nation's terrorists. And in a way, that's exactly what we're seeing right now with the situation in Iran. To us over here, Iran is a terrorist nation. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is a terrorist organization. They would probably say the same about America and its military. Here's some before and after pictures. Before America showed up and after America showed up. Now, not all of them can actually be attributed strictly to America. But we take a look at this. We take a look at Iraq. We take a look at Libya. Yemen, they do have some forces on the ground, but I actually would argue that is more the Saudi Arabians than anything else. Syria, they're playing their part over there with the people they finance, but also even having troops on the ground there. But these are at least all nations that they have American troops on the ground. But we can see the before and after pictures. The people in these nations would probably consider America a terrorist nation. The American military to be terrorists. Now, that's not the way even I want to describe them. Because believe it or not, even though I'm sitting here and I have spent the last few days especially shitting on the American military and America itself, I actually do want to have them as close friends. But the thing is right now, their military is going around the world and committing atrocious acts like this. Acts that can easily be considered crimes against humanity. War crimes. When you use white phosphorus, that is what you are doing. So it's not as cut and dry as people want to believe. Oop, hold on. That's a video I'm about to pull up for you all. So, I want to take you a video from the pro-Israeli think tank Washington Institute. And this is Patrick Clausen. I should probably switch over the screen. This is Patrick Clausen, and what he is talking about here. He is literally calling for a false flag against Iran. This was back in 2012.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war. One can combine other means of pressure with sanctions. I mentioned that explosion on August 17th. We could step up the pressure. I mean, look, people, Iranian submarines periodically go down. Someday one of them might not come up. Who would know why? We can do a variety of things if we wish to increase the pressure. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just suggesting that this is not a either-or proposition. It's just sanctions has to succeed or other things. We are in the game of using covert means against the Iranians. We could get nastier at that.
And just a quick history lesson on something he wanted to say. Before I do that, have you ever noticed that, yes, America has gone to war whenever there's been an attack like this that was necessary? An attack that called them into action. Now, some of these have been false flags. Some of these have been legitimate. But have you ever noticed that there was one legitimate attack on the U.S. military, on the United States itself, on the United States people, that they didn't go to war for? And that was the sinking of the USS Liberty. That has more or less been, no, not more or less, it has been proven that regardless of what the Israelis say, it was a deliberate attack. Because there are reports from those who were on the boat that day, on the ship, that were, when they saw the Israeli reconnaissance planes going by, they were waving at it. They had a huge American flag that was waving on their boat. There has even been audio that has been released between the Israeli pilots that attacked that ship and ground control, where they were explicitly saying it was these are the Americans, this is an American ship, and they're told to attack it. Now, one of the reasons for that, actually, was because, at the time, the Israelis were at war, and it was quite clear that they were the aggressors in this war. And they didn't want America to know that because the USS Liberty was a spy ship. It was a long-range communication ship. And if they found out that Israel was the aggressors, America wouldn't have got involved in the war. In fact, during that attack, when they believed that it was Egypt that was attacking the ship, there was a Code November that was put out. Now, a Code November means a nuclear strike. So, American planes, American bombers, were loaded up with a nuclear bomb and were on their way to Cairo to drop it. Just minutes beforehand, they were called off. Now, even the president at that time, I think it was Eisenhower, but I can't really remember. The president on that time explicitly said, in regards to the USS Liberty, I want that fucking ship on the bottom of the ocean. He knew what was happening, and he let the attack happen, which led to the deaths of dozens of American sailors. And while Israel did apologize for it, they said it was an accident, it was a case of mistaken identity. That was not true. Not even close. But there's something else I want to point out in this video.
Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. What would be best for U.S. interests? Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode.
Now, once again, he's talking about false flags right now. He's talking about that. Now, here's something else, a nice little tidbit to know about what ended up happening with Woodrow Wilson. During World War I, the Allied forces going against the Germans were not doing so great. They were suffering massive casualties, they couldn't break through, and they needed assistance. So what ended up happening was that I think it was called the European Zionist League. It's been a while since I looked it up, so it was the Zionist organization over there in Europe. They ended up coming to the British government and pretty much said, you know, you're not doing so hot. The war ain't going so great. What if we get America involved in the war? We'll do this for you. We'll get America involved in the war. What you have to do for us is allow the Jews to immigrate to Palestine. And that was what was known as the Balfour Declaration, because the British government had control over Palestine at that time. So what they ended up doing, this was, I believe it was Nathan de Rothschild, but it was a Rothschild. It was Bernard Baruch and Paul Warburg, I believe. It was either Paul or his brother Max Warburg. But anyway, what they ended up doing was they started digging into Woodrow Wilson. And they found out that Wilson had had a relationship with a woman who was having an extramarital affair. She was married. And they used this to blackmail him. Told the husband about it, and the husband was trying to blackmail Woodrow Wilson for $40,000, which a lot of money back in those days. Money that Wilson did not have. So then they came before Wilson, and they said, we will pay them off and make this all go away for you. Nobody has to know, but you have to get America involved in World War I. Because Wilson ran on a campaign of keeping America out of World War I. It was a European war. It was their problem, not America's problem. But Wilson did just this. He got America involved in World War I. And then it was the sinking of Lusitania, the reason that they got into the war. And we now know that they deliberately did this, because the Germans were trying to warn all American ships that were coming into the area. They tried to put out messages in the newspapers saying, hey, you're traveling into a war zone. You might be mistaken for an enemy vessel that is transporting supplies. But the newspapers were owned by the Morgan family and the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, all of them. It was owned by them, so they refused to publish this article warning Americans. So Lusitania went into into European waters, and it was sunk. Now, about 100 years or so, give or take, after the sinking of this ship, it turned out that divers found the wreckage and investigated it, and they found millions of rounds that were being stored in there. It was a civilian ship, and they were using it to transport weapons towards the war. They did this willingly. They used these people as human shields. And they all did it. The reason that these people died, the reason the ship was sank, the reason Wilson got into World War I is because the Rothschilds, Bernard Baruch, and the Wahlbergs wanted the Jews to immigrate to Palestine. Now, a few years after this event, there was a book that was released called Practical Idealism, written by Richard Kalergi. I've mentioned it before. Richard Kalergi wrote this book, and in this book, he was talking about how the entire human population should be forced to mixed race breed. Essentially, his plan was not just, a lot of people like to talk about the Kalergi plan, how it's anti-white, and it is, but it's actually anti-race in general. It's not just the Europeans and white people that Richard Kalergi wanted eliminated to be mixed race. He wanted the entire world to be like this, except for the Jewish people. And it became known as the Kalergi Plan. Now, the Kalergi Plan was backed by the Rothschilds, Bernard Baruch, and the Warburgs. And later on in life, when he became big, a name you probably all know for sure, George Soros. These were people that backed the Kalergi Plan. The plan to move everyone into urban areas, move them into the cities, stuff them all in, mix everyone together, and then this new breed of humanity would be ruled by the Jewish people. And these same people that advocated for the Balfour Declaration, that advocated to get Wilson to bring Americans into the war, into World War I, where over 100,000 Americans died, were the same people backing this plan. Fun little history lesson for you. I did kind of get off topic there. So this assassination on Soleimani, on this Iranian general, once again, it was a preemptive defensive strike to prevent any sort of attack on American soldiers that would have killed many American soldiers. But a report was released in 2008. This is from Haaretz. U.S. gives Israel green light to assassinate Iranian General Soleimani. Al Jarida, a Kuwaiti newspaper which in recent years has broken exclusive stories from Israel, says Israel was on the verge of assassinating Soleimani, but the U.S. warned Tehran and thwarted the operation. So, they actually prevented an assassination on Soleimani just last year. But they're also claiming that Soleimani was responsible for the death of 600 American soldiers. So which one is it? They prevented the assassination, but then again, it gave Israel the green light to do it. So you can see how the narrative ain't exactly standing up. It isn't exactly standing up to what they're saying. I don't want to be so cringy and use this line, but as the saying goes, the first casualty of war is the truth. And there's one. Now, there have been some false videos that are making their way around online right now. And this had to do, once again, with the Mike Pompeo talking point about how they're actually trying to prevent a war in Iran, and that the people are going to come together and praise America for bringing them freedom. And it was some videos that were making their way around online, this being one of them. This video right here that you're seeing was being presented as Iranians that were celebrating in the street upon hearing the death of Soleimani. That this guy had committed all these atrocities, and they were so upset that they were so happy that now he was gone, that they were hosting these parties. But that's not the case. These are old videos that people dug up and were then trying to present it to push the propaganda that what America did was in the best interest of the Iranian people. There's not the only one. There have been a number of videos that are making their way around, but that has been supposed to be them celebrating the death. But none of them, as far as I can tell, have turned out to be true. And of course, with anything that ends up happening with this, there is some false reporting that ends up happening. Not always intentional for propaganda's sake, but sometimes it's accidental. They hear a story, they present it, and it turns out not to be true. This, I'm not sure what to make of it. Because there was a report that started late last night. And it turned out to be fake, I guess. So there was a report that there was an airstrike last night on Taji in Iraq. And it said a U.S. drone airstrike killed 6 pro-Iran militia commanders. But then this morning, there were reports that this was not the case. So this is from Reuters right now. Iraq military denies airstrike took place on Saturday in Taji. Iraq's military denied on Saturday an airstrike had taken place on a medical convoy in Taji, North Baghdad. Iraq's Popular Mobilization Force umbrella grouping of paramilitary groups had said earlier on Saturday that the airstrike targeting its fighters hit a convoy of medics. However, the PMF later issued another statement saying that no medical convoys were targeted in Taji. Now, I'm not exactly sure what to make of this, because it would actually, if this turned out to be true, this would actually be in Iraq and Iran's best interest. Because right now, another thing that's going on in Iraq, apparently, where is it? Is the fact that after the airstrike, Iraq is reconsidering its relationship with the U.S. And there's even a report that what is supposed to be the Iraq government, and I say that because as I spoke yesterday, Iraq's only a country in name only. There's a lot of division and sectarian violence that's going on right there as they fight for control. But what is the U.S. and international communities recognized government of Iraq is now preparing to vote about whether about asking America to leave. Now, America is not going to leave, but this is probably the point, is that they know America's not going to leave, but if they officially ask America to leave and they don't, then it's going to kind of show that America is not there for their best interest, but is in fact there in order to be the overseers of the nation. They're there as a conquering force. And there was also another false report that was going around that was stating that America was arresting leaders, members of Iraqi parliament that were going to vote for them to leave. But the newspaper that released that, a Middle Eastern newspaper, ended up retracting that story later on. But I don't know what to make of this, because it would be in Iraq's and Iran's best interest for them to, if it had actually hit a convoy of medics, because that would be a lot of bad press for America and Donald Trump. But now they're denying this ever ended up happening, so I'm not exactly sure what to make of this story. It seems like it didn't happen, but I'm not sure. So, we do know, though, that there are a number of American military personnel that are on their way to Iraq right now. It was confirmed that after the strike on Soleimani, that there were 3,500, I believe it was, 3,500 American Marines that were on their way to Iraq in order with everything, the raising tensions. We also know that there's a number of U.S. Air Force planes that are on their way as well. Some of these are transports, some of these are I guess you would call them assault planes, assault aircrafts. Again, I'm not a military personnel, and so I don't have necessarily my terminology correct on that. But it also says that 8,500 paratroopers from the U.S. Army are expected in the region. So tensions are escalating, and even Iran itself has brought some reinforcements into the area as well. Israeli aircrafts have been spotted over Bekaa-e, Lebanon, probably making their way into the area. But there was, where was it? I just saw it, actually. It was talking about the Iranian reinforcements that were showing up. Anyway. There it is. Iranian reinforcements have arrived at Bukamal City, amongst an alert in the city and a tightening of checkpoints. So it doesn't seem to be an extreme mobilization of forces right now, although both sides are increasing the amount of troops in their areas. But if this continues and more troops get set in, well, something similar is what led off to World War I. After the death of Franz Ferdinand, it was allies got called in, armies began mobilizing themselves across the border, and eventually I believe it was Germany and the Austro-Hungarians who made the first move and crossed the border. I don't know, but I get the feeling that it's unlikely that Iran's going to make the first move in this war. And I think one of the reasons for that is because Iran knows the way that the Western world kind of views them right now. They know what they're trying to do, that they're trying to draw Iran out into an open war. This is what America wants, this is what the Saudi Arabians want, this is what Israel wants. So if they don't bite, that you can have some skirmishes in Iraq and along the Iranian border. But as long as they don't move into a full-blown open warfare, then they're playing the game safe, which is what I think they're trying to do. But it's quite clear that there's going to be a response for what ended up happening. Because today it was reported that the red flag of jihad was raised as thousands of mourned death Soleimani's in Baghdad. So this flag that was here, it was hoisted over the holy mosque of Jamkaran in Qom, Iran's holiest city. Now the flag is usually blue. The red flag is only brought out to refer to vengeance. Some are claiming that it means war, but there's no official declaration of war as of yet. But this is a symbol that Iran is sending to its people and to the world. This is a symbol that things are going to get much worse before they get much better. I think I covered all of the relevant points today. Again, this was mostly just coming in to do an update. I didn't really have much of a flow to it, just kind of going through looking up the most important stories. I guess the last thing I'll leave you on is that there have been a video. There's this video here are supposedly American helicopters that are flying over the Iraqi city of Fallujah. God damn, Twitter videos suck. So this is supposed to be them, which again is showing an increased mobility in the area, an increase in force in the area by both sides. Oh yeah, there was one more thing I wanted to get into. Briefly, it had to do with what's going on with who's calling for war, because I'm seeing a lot of Christians who seem perfectly okay with this type of strike. Now, I would say that one of my criticism of Christianity is that it's lost a lot of its teeth, and it's allowed itself to be pussified. It's been pussified, and it actually is a problem, because when there is actually a invasion of Muslims coming into the West, and their culture is being changed from within, it's actually, they're not doing anything about it. But then when it's something like this, a strike on a foreign target, an assassination that resulted in the deaths of multiple civilians, multiple collateral damage. They're now cheering this on. And here's a video of, I'm not sure exactly who it is, but it's an evangelical Christian celebrating the U.S. Middle East strike with Trump yesterday. And we'll just take a quick look at this. Not long, 19 seconds. Done.
Do something so great in him and in...
God damn it. I'm just going to refresh the page. Make it easier on myself.
In him and in this... Do something so great in him and in this nation that the pundits on TV and the news anchors will be amazed at how great America is, because God is great in America again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Do something so great.
This is in response to an airstrike. So they're allowing their own culture to be taken from them. They're refusing to speak out against, well, like the Pope would be one of them, this, who is hardly a Catholic. We have all these evangelicals that have refused to speak out, refused to allow their culture to be taken from them. But then something like this, not only are they praising it, they're praying to God and saying that God is great in America, in a terrible airstrike that could lead to an extreme war where thousands of people, tens of thousands of people will die. I don't know, it's just, to me, these days, I see a lot of Christians just don't seem to have their morals in place. There is a time and a place for a war, but it's quite clear that this is not a war in the benefit of America, and they're praising it. This was not an attack, a direct attack on America, because again, this is all a response to a response to a response to a response, and it's just been going that way. While American soldiers were overseas in a foreign country, this is not like it was a direct attack on U.S. soldiers or U.S. citizens on the mainland, in America itself. Then it would be different. But when you're posted abroad, overseas, the situation is different. If you're walking around someone else's country with a gun, then you better be ready for some action. But those are the updates over the last 24 hours or so of Iran and the situation there. We'll end up seeing what else comes out of it. Thank you all for tuning in to the True North Report, news everyone needs to know.